So, on our last podcast, I think we had a really meaningful discussion about access. And I think what we touched on probably predominantly in that particular episode was what access is, but we didn't really talk too much about how to restrict it and when you should restrict it. I want to first start off by saying your time, in my opinion, is your greatest asset. I don't know if there is a more valuable asset than time. People often contest and say love, or they'll say money, or they'll say a number of different things. But from my perspective, you can't have money, you can't have love, you can't have anything without time. You need the time to be able to spend it. So what you do with your time should be entirely up to you. And in today's day and age, we have 9-to-5s. I mean, even if you're working part-time or even if you're running your own business, you may be working more hours than most people. We have hobbies, we have groceries, we have bills to pay. There's so many different things that already allocate we allocate our time towards that little bit of free time that you have, and definitely the free space mentally that you have. I feel like you should be the person who gets to determine where that's spent, and people shouldn't be able to get upset with you if you decide to spend it not with them. How do we restrict access in a respectful manner? I would say, number one, you should be vetting the people that you entertain from the jump. It's much easier to keep somebody out than it is to get somebody out. Would you agree?
Yeah, no, I agree. And I think to add on that, I like what you said about like vetting people that you kind of already have in. But I also think it also depends, because I feel like you can, in your own self, have the most respect to, keep someone out or cut someone out, and think you're doing it in the most respectful way, but everyone has their own perspective of stuff, you know what I mean? And so you might think you're doing it in a respectful way, and that's totally up to you, and that's fine. And I agree with, that being okay, but that person might not take it that way, you know what I mean? And so you kind of have to be okay with possibly letting that person down and almost getting backlash at the fact that you may have not done it respectfully in their eyes. And I think that's what scares a lot of people from, taking that step forward to start excluding themselves away from certain relationships, is the fear of the backlash that you're going to get from that specific person, or even other people connected to that person that you're also still associated with. So I think it's definitely, it really depends on the intention of your heart. As long as your intention was not ill-mannered, I feel like you can just roll off with that. And then at that point, it's like that other specific individual, it's their responsibility to either it's their own responsibility to feel the way they want to feel about that.
Yeah, it's a maturity thing at the end of the day.
Oh yeah, no, that's pretty much what I was kind of getting. It really is a maturity thing, but I feel like a lot of people, when you throw the word out maturity, they think they're the most mature person. You know what I mean? So I kind of feel like you have to kind of dive a little bit deeper into what you mean by maturity. And it's exactly, kind of what I said is you have to know that person they're responsible for their feelings. Yeah. You're responsible for yours. I'm responsible for how I take something that you tell me. We're good friends. If you tell me something and I take it the wrong way and that's not the way you meant it, I'm responsible for taking it that way, not anyone else.
Yeah. I think that's also why I said, at the very beginning, like, restrict people from the beginning. Like, don't let them get to a place where now it's all of a sudden, is it rude, is it not rude to remove them? Because if you keep your circle small, then you don't really have to worry about new people coming in and affecting you. I saw this gentleman who's a friend of, I know we mention them from time to time because they're fairly large on social media and they've garnered a lot of attention. But there's this guy who's a friend of the Tate brothers, and it was so funny. He was sitting on this podcast, and is it like Fresh and Fit? Is that what it's called? And yeah, Fresh and Fit guys. And so he was like, this woman started asking him questions, and he's like, I find you annoying. He's like, you're annoying me. And I was like, oh, that's like, to me, what he was relaying to her. And people actually majoritively, I'll try and find the clip just so I can put it up, but people majoritively seem to agree and side with her. She was asking him questions like, why can't you be only with one woman? Why can't you do this? And it was funny because he was like, you're annoying me. I actually don't appreciate, because you keep asking me the same question over and over again. I've already given you an answer. You don't have to agree with my opinions, and I don't have to share them, and we don't have to be friends. We don't even need to share the same spaces a lot of times. Common spaces make sense. Me and you in the grocery store, we need to be respectful to one another. But where I spend that, once again, that minute amount of time that we're always trying to make bigger and bigger and more as we grow, where I spend that time, I feel like, is really an indication not only of myself, but it's also an indication of the trajectory that I'm on. Because if I spend it with people who I'm not thriving with and whose company I'm not enjoying, I'm more likely to lead a life that is not filled with joy. Would you agree?
Yeah, I feel like you have to pay attention to what I would think about in your future, like 5 years in the future. However you spend your time now will be based on, or will pretty much predict how your 5-year plan was going to work out. So it'll be easy to align that with the people you hang out with as well. So if you're hanging out with people who are not on the same path, and the same mindset that you have, then if you're hanging out with people that doesn't have the same mindset you have, I don't think your goals that you want to reach are going to be as attainable. You always hear people say, let me see your close friends, I'll show you how your future is. You hear that time and time again. So yeah, the easier way to divvy out your friends is to look at your 5-year plan in the future.
And he brings up such an interesting point, because what I want to touch on is whatever other people want to do isn't necessarily wrong. So like, let's run a scenario. Person A and person B, okay? Person A says, I want to get to destination number 1. And person B says, I want to get to destination number 2. Those two people do not need to be on the same team. They're going in two totally different directions. Are either of them wrong? No, I've assigned nothing but letters and numbers thus far. Neither person is wrong. They're just not headed in the same direction, so they're wrong for one another. And maybe they'll get to destination 1 and destination 2 and realize that they actually could help each other. But let's let them figure that out on that part of their journey. What they can't do, because it would be to their detriment, is to start off on the journey where they both try and go in the same direction. They're going to end up in the middle of 1 and 2 at 1.5, which is where neither of them was intending to be, right? And they might think, I got pretty close, but I'm going to be honest with you. When people move me off of my trajectory, I can't hold them responsible or have any malice towards them. That's my responsibility. It's my responsibility to get me to where I want to go. And the way that I do that needs to be respectful. It needs to be kind. It needs to be conscious, but it also needs to be direct. I appreciate people who are direct with me and are like, Reg, I'm not supposed to be on this team with you. As opposed to people who prolong and then we find out later that they're not trying to be a part of that journey. And I've had that happen many times. And I love when people are like, hey, I want to do these things with you, but I don't want to do that. Or I don't want to do any of it with you. Both of those are fine as long as they communicate well. You know, the reason I'm able to accept it so easy is because I have a lot of self-awareness and I have a lot of self-love. And I also have a lot of great people around me. So it makes it like super easy for me, because I'm like, oh, you don't want to be around? Like, I can just call Mike, I can call Andrew, I can call Chris, I can call Cristobal, I can call Savannah, I can call Nicole. I have so many people that are in my group right now. It's one interesting thing. We have probably the largest, healthiest group. Got to say both. Largest and healthiest group with the most direction that I have seen as of recent times. Like, there was, I'm mentioning him again, but it was something that I think it was Tristan Tate talked about. And he was like, when he was growing up, he thought more people had the brotherhood that him and Tristan had. And he grew up and realized that nobody was doing that. It was literally just them. And I'm looking at us, and then I look around and I'm like, oh wait, I don't think there's anyone else who's trying to attack business, who's trying to damn near live together, not only to save costs, but also to be closer to do more. Because we all have a similar trajectory. We all have a consciously chosen exact destination of where we want to get to. That we've continued with a fine-tooth comb to run over and groom to be what we want it to be. Find your clique, find your pack, if you will. And when you do, treat them extremely well, and you won't be very worried about other people coming in or not coming into your life. My question that I have, if I may, is you've restricted that access to somebody. How do you do so in a kind and conscious manner? What does it sound like?
Ooh, that's going to take me a little minute.
Personally, I appreciate, and I think I mentioned this a few moments ago, when people are direct. I don't like to be strung along. Friendships, relationships, even work. I'd hate for a job to keep me around for 6 months and the whole time they've been thinking about letting me go. I want you to be direct with me and say, hey, here's where we feel like you fit into this. And I think that the problem with clarity that we run into and being direct that we run into more nowadays than ever is that people don't even know what they want. So it's hard to ask them to be direct. They don't even feel like they're not being direct with you because they don't even realize what they need to be direct on for themselves.
Yeah. I think for me, definitely, I direct. The way I've tried to be as well is just be more direct, or just kind of, I think I mentioned it last time, just say less, you know what I mean? Saying less to like specific people. Like, I can be cool with you, you know what I mean? And, have conversation, we hang out in the same group, but you know who I am, but you don't know who I am. Let me say that one more time.
That's a bar.
You know who I am, but you don't know who I am. I go to the gym. I live in San Diego. Okay, you know what I do for work. But you don't know my struggles. You don't know my mental capacity, my emotional capacity. You don't know, my daily routine. You don't know, like me, like who I am as a person, like my, like deep down who I am. You just see, oh, okay, that's Andrew, he's cool, he's funny, he goes to the gym, he works so-and-so, and, he lives in San Diego. That's as far as you know. And then people that know me, people that, I'll text, I'll say what's up, I'll, like you guys, like we'll talk, before this podcast, outside of this podcast, things like that. It's like, you guys know, like, okay, like Andrew's currently in a good state in his life, or man, Andrew's mentally struggling right now, or dang, Andrew is going through a transition in life with work or with moving, things like that. Like, those are the people that know me. And so I'm getting better at, like, when I meet new people, especially now, because I have my circle, I have the people that I know that, like, okay, these are the type of people, these are the people that I want to grow with, and then I want to excel a relationship with through years, decades. These are the people that I want to do that with. They're solidified. This is what I want. If someone else wants to join that, then they kind of almost have to prove themselves to us. They have to prove themselves to me, and they have to prove themselves to my group. Now, when I meet new people, it's like, you'll know who I am. And over time, because I believe time is what allows you to gain my respect, to be able to allow you into possibly, and this is possibly into my group. And that's a big possibly, because I've already, what I just said, I've already solidified a specific group of people. There's no one else going in unless you've gained that reputation, that respect to be invited. Saying less. You'll get to know me. You'll get to know what I do. But as far as anything more than that, that's where it kind of ends. You know what I mean? Yeah. And I like to talk a lot. Like, I'm a big talker, and so I think it's a practice that I've been trying to do a lot better at, is just saying less, but saying enough. If that makes sense.
Yeah. I have noticed you say this a few times about yourself. When you haven't fully expressed yourself to certain individuals, a lot of times this happens at the gym, they begin to draw their own conclusions and their own narratives, and they started to call you, honestly, it sounded kind of like they were calling you names from like middle school and elementary type stuff. We're not going to touch on that too much, but I want to take the lesson from it. what I would want people to know, I don't really know much about much, but I do know this. Other people's opinions of you really don't matter. They really don't, because they don't pay your bills. They don't truly have a practical effect on you as an individual. It'd be very difficult for somebody to actually intrude into your day-to-day life unless you let them. The more you become quiet, and this is something I'm also trying to work on too, the more that you begin to reserve yourself and your energy for the people who you know deserve it. Unfortunately, people have to begin to draw their own conclusions. It's kind of like any type of myth. Think about any myth that you've ever heard over the history of your life, and think about how many people have come up with different variations of that myth. The reason that they don't all have one conclusive, solid story that's cohesive is because they don't know anything about the subject. They truly don't know what happened. So they have to come up with their imagination, their own idea of what may or may not have happened. Imagine someone who knows you and they know, let's just give an equation, right? Let's just say right now, all three of us are looking out and we see a dolphin jump out of the water. All three of us saw it. With our eyes, we saw it. We know when we go down to the car and we're like, yo, Nicole, Sav, everyone, Chris, we saw a dolphin jump out of the water. That's what we saw because we saw it. We may have even heard it as it splashed back down. Versus if you two were faced this way and I caught out of my peripheral, thought I saw a dolphin splash out of the water, but you thought you heard a boat and you thought you saw a bird diving, right? Now we have these three different perspectives because we didn't have direct line of sight. We didn't have direct access to the information as to what really happened. People are going to draw their own conclusions. Allow them. I remember back in the day, I used to want to be called the man, the myth, the legend. Well, what comes with that is everyone's going to take the man and turn him into a myth and then turn him into a legend. And then they're going to draw their conclusions based off of no information at all sometimes. And that's okay.
Yeah, I agree with you. I've had to be okay with allowing myself to be okay with letting people say what they want to say. Before it bugged me. It'd get under my skin. Like when people that I didn't really know, they weren't even acquaintances, would say certain things, and I heard that they said certain things, like it would bug me. Now what bugs me the most is people in my group saying things. You know what I mean? Like people that I thought were in my close group, when they would say things, I'm like, man, like these are people that I've accepted and allowed into a specific part of my life that I have taken time to kind of not expose but open up. And when they say things, or when they don't feel like, when I don't feel as much appreciated, or like things like that, that's what bugs me the most now. And so there's definitely been a shift, and now I don't really care like what other people say, but like people in my group, like those are the people that I don't want to let down. Those are the people that I don't want to feel, in a sense, a disassociation as far as like, oh, Andrew's this way, because I almost feel like I'm letting them down. You know what I mean? Or I feel like I'm lacking in something.
Can I ask you a question?
Yeah.
This is going to be a deeper one. You don't have to answer it honestly, because this is kind of a, do you get rid of those people? Because I would. So like, for instance, if Mike consistently, if I found out like 2, 3, 4 times Mike's going somewhere and is like, yo, Reg is doing this over here, and he's never brought this up to me, and I have to find out through other people, I'm gonna first, number one step, I'm gonna come to Mike and say, hey Mike, did you say all these things? And hopefully in this scenario Mike would say, yeah man, yeah, this is how I was feeling. I'd be like, why didn't you bring this up to me? And why didn't you tell me that you felt this way? That would only need to happen a few number of times before I would begin to distance myself.
Then that's literally, you're already answering the question. I've more now, rather than me like talking to them about it, because some of the stuff, like, they'll, you know, like, they think they're being funny, or it's just like, you know, like teasing, things like that, but it's just stuff that I'm just like, okay, like, you're just being too much, like you're doing too much. And like, you know, us guys know when we're doing too much. We're just trying to, you know, be the funny one in the group, and being the funny one means making fun of someone else. For me, I just start distancing myself, and that's what I'm doing now. Like, I'm just distancing myself, like doing my own thing, like being okay with, like, okay, like there's no need for me, if I was to exit myself out of this group or not intervene or join in as much, they probably wouldn't notice. Or if they did, then they can do the work to come ask me, yo man, what's up, da-da-da, and then we can have that conversation. I don't need to put more energy into it or more attention into it when I already feel some type of way. I'd rather than exerting more energy and trying to explain myself when I don't have to, I'm just gonna be like, okay, like that's just not for me. Let me just distance myself. Because I have people that I care about that I can just shift over. You know what I mean?
But ideally, I just want to make sure I have the situation correct, because you and I might actually have a fundamental disagreement on this. These people were in your group, though, right?
Yeah, people that, you know, people that were in my group. Yeah.
We have two different approaches, because I'm a come see you type of person, and you are I'm gonna fall back and see if you put any effort into coming to talk to me about it.
Yeah, and I think for me, it's due to history of the fact that I'm, like, you know, like I'm all about, like, when it comes devoted, like you tell me to show up, I'm gonna show up. Is that
consistently?
Consistently. When I'm gonna show up, I'm gonna show up. I've canceled other plans to make sure that I show up no matter what. For me, I've come to the conclusion that, and this is for me, and you know, this, you know, your opinion can be your opinion. This is for me specifically, that I've now exhausted myself to the capacity that I feel like I show up for a lot of people, and I've shown up for a lot of people, that there's no need, that it's in the books that I've shown up for people, and I have people that can attest that I'm the type of person to show up, that I don't need to continue to show up. I can just slowly fall back. Yeah. And that's okay for me, because now I'm like, I've already shown up. Why should I show up even more to allow you to, in a sense, win me back almost? That's the way I see it. And that's the part where, because I can be won back pretty easily. Like if you're like, oh man, I'm sorry, I'm like, oh, okay, cool. Like I'm a very easy forgiving person. Like if you did something, you know, pretty messed up, and you're like, oh man, I didn't mean it, I'll be like, oh, okay, don't worry about it. Like I'd let it slide. Like I'm like that. And I know you're not like that. You're like, nah, you know what I mean? But that's because I need people like you, and like you who are like, no, like, you know what I mean? Because I'm not like that. And that's how we're different. And so for me, what I've learned to do is, rather than allowing you to almost win me back, I'm just gonna remove myself back a little bit, because I don't want to, and in a sense, I don't want like my heart to be broken. Like I don't want to allow you to, like, what's the word I'm looking for? To allow you to disappoint me again.
I'm kind of curious. What would you do in that situation? Because I actually understand what he's saying, and I still slightly differ. But I'm kind of curious. What would Mike do? I know that you have really worked on your own mental health. Would Mike today go and try and communicate, or would Mike today rather just let things be?
I will let things be, because that's actually the easiest way to go, in my opinion. If you confront somebody about it, it can have a negative connotation over time. However, if you're more so distant and you just continue doing your thing, everything becomes understood over time. It may sound passive aggressive depending on the context you look at, how you look at it. But if you just let things be, and like you continue to do whatever the hell you're doing, and they start getting their own habits and things they do, then it just becomes understood between you two that you guys are doing your own thing and there's no real bad blood. I'd rather there just not be bad blood. If it bothers you though, and because you have expectations, then I would go with the first option, which would be to confront them to make sure everything is clear. Hopefully everybody in the party is grown people and they can understand rationally what the issue is. So yeah, in that case, I would confront somebody. But if you almost feel taken advantage of, because you're expected to be there more than everybody else is, then distancing would probably be the more mature thing to do. Like I said, unless they have promised expectations already. Way back in the day, we're all young, right? And we don't really have too many responsibilities. Everything's taken care of for us. Pretty much we don't exactly have bills. I'm talking about high school days. So we're used to having a social group that doesn't necessarily benefit us. Of course, there's the few that become millionaires at 15, whatever. But for the most of us, we put ourselves in social groups that don't really benefit our future. We put ourselves in social groups that are fun. Video games, hobbies, depending who you are, whatever. However, when we get older, we start to have responsibilities and we start to discover experiences and disadvantages. So we have what we call consequences. You don't pay bills, bad things happen. You piss off the wrong people, bad things happen. So with those experiences, you start to gain value in your people around you and then your hobbies. So you go against those, or so you don't have to deal with those consequences. I think the people that take the right values and know what their future is versus just the consequences that's in the near future, I think those people are the ones that grow up to be successful, or like really successful in life, versus just trying to avoid consequences, just living in the moment. If you live in the moment, cool, your mental health is good, but you can only do it for so long before you have that yearning for something more, before you go through the same thing day in and day out, partying and drinking, stuff like that, and just making just enough money to pay your bills, and then not really going after something successful in life.
But is your mental health good, or are you just avoiding?
Both. That strongly depends on the person. One could argue that you have to go through a few years, if not a few months, but a few years of really tough mental stress in order to achieve like long-term goals. Other people have it easy, so I guess it just depends on the person's situation, but yeah.
I can't speak for everybody. When I'm not focused, dude, my mental stress is high. Like the strain on me mentally, I think I am both my best friend and my worst adversary.
Same.
Nobody has ever beat me up more than me.
Same.
So when people bring me outside drama, outside negativity, I'm like, get in line. I promise you there's somebody who's in first place. I'm not talking about like extreme detractors, like I can't really cheat on myself or, anything like that. But what I am saying is like the person who's always in my ear saying you need to be doing better and you need to be going harder is me. Mm-hmm. And the only way that I calm that voice a lot of times is when I am surrounded by the right people and I limit my access. And also when I'm making strides towards the goals that I want to accomplish. I can't tell you how many times I found myself in a situation where the person that I was battling with the hardest for months at a time was myself. And the person that I really needed to talk to, that I was avoiding the most for months at a time, was myself. And a lot of what access has to do with what I'm discussing is if you keep opening up your access to do as Mike said and, have a good time and be around people who don't fit your goals, you are putting a Band-Aid on a very large wound that needs some serious attention in order to heal. And it scares me because when I see it in other people, it often reminds me of myself. You guys ever have that situation where you look at somebody and it took a lot of self-awareness for me to figure out, but you ever have a situation where you look at somebody and they're doing something and it's really getting on your nerves and you can't quite tell why, and then when you get home and you think about it, it's like, oh, that reminds me of me and something I don't like about myself. Has that ever happened to you?
Probably. I just can't think of something right now.
All right, so how I'm about to explain it might be just in my own head or my own experiences. I feel like it's just, if somebody does something that makes you upset in that context, it's probably because you already experienced it and realized that there was nothing good that came from it. So when you see them do it, you just don't know how to communicate to them that, hey, whatever this thing you're doing is not going to benefit you in the future. But you also have to be careful of projecting that onto them, because in their situation it might. So it really depends on context.
Oh, that's beautiful. So here's the situation. Let me give you a little bit of context. I was at the gym one time, and a guy started acting super childish. He started slamming the weights. He started like yelling real loud. He was like walking around. He threw his belt down. He was actually, I'm not making this up, he was practicing how to take his belt off fast and like throw it on the ground, like for the look of the video. And I love that for him. I'm glad he was having a good time. But for some reason, it was really getting under my skin. And I was like, oh, Reg, the reason that that's getting under your skin is because you used to do that shit. You used to be the guy in the gym who was obnoxious. You used to be the guy in the gym who was loud. And then I looked at him and I was like, wait a minute, how old is this dude? I was like, bro, like this dude's like 22 years old. This kid is 22 years old. I'm like, Reg, you're 20, probably 6 at that particular time. I'm like, dude, that's a phase that you also had to go through. And it reminded me it reminded me the humanity and the nature of humanity is one that I always try to believe is pure, because I don't think people are intentionally, from a majorative perspective, I don't think that people are, from a worldview perspective, I don't think that people are trying to harm or hurt. But unfortunately, I think that we all have to go through our own struggles in order to reach a stage of wisdom where we are no longer adverse to the world around us and even to ourselves.
I believe struggle brings wisdom. And I don't know if it's a direct word, but consequence. For example, your buddy that was throwing weights or throwing whatever on the floor, if one day he freaking rips off his belt and it gets damaged, or he hits a little girl in the face, there's going to be a consequence to that. He's going to realize like, oh, hey, this is dumb as hell. Or if there's like a social media trend where it just calls out people who very specifically rips off belts and just throws it on the floor, he's going to have a negative connotation with himself connected to that trend. So then he's going to feel like, hey, everybody thinks that's dumb, so now I'm going to believe that's dumb as hell as well. So I believe going through it and actually going through that phase to realize there's a consequence behind every action will make you get out of that phase faster.
Yeah, it's necessary. Mm-hmm. It really is necessary for them to grow. I just don't think it's necessarily for them to grow right here next to me, because I have stuff that I'm trying to figure out. Like, seriously, I'm being real. Like, yeah. I love people, and at the same time, oh my God, sometimes I cannot stand human beings.
Oh, we know.
Dude, bro, listen. But I love people. I think that we are the most beautiful, complex, interesting creatures in the world, and I think that we deserve a chance to turn things around and make things right. But unfortunately, at the same time, I do lose faith a lot of times, and I have to run back to my isolation because the input into my life becomes a little bit too much to bear. So then I have to isolate, and I have to go, you know what? I got to just stick around Mike, Andrew, Cristobal. Like, I just have to stay around my core 5 people and just grind in that space. And it's interesting because you spend your day around so many other people anyways, that it's like when you get to that one person who's interrupting that free time, you also have to remember you at work and somebody yelled at you. You were at home and somebody was upset with you. You were here and this was happening. That bill needed to get paid and you were the one that had to pay it. So like, it's not even that you didn't face adversity in all those other aspects of life. Life is more complex than that. You know, I think that everyone deserves time to grow. I just don't know that they have to do that within your space and within your capacity. That's the piece that I feel like you should control.
You speaking facts to yourself, bro.
I know, I needed this for me.
Yeah.
This is self-therapy at this point.
Real.
So that's a double-edged sword, in a good way and a bad way, because it's also in the mindset of having a mentor. If you're going through phases in life and you want to be like a very specific person, you get a mentor that's in that field. Oh, man, if you're speaking to the mentor and he's like, hey, you're dumb as hell, but you're trying to be like him, you can't necessarily expect him to push you away because he wants you to go through your own phase. So it is good to have a mentor in that case. So we just got to be careful how we speak of not having somebody who's growing outside of our circle. We can mentor them, we could have distance on them, but having them in our circle could be too much, but also depends on the relationship.
That. Damn.
Yeah. I agree with what you're saying.
Hey, shit.
Give me the mic.
Fuck. That's a good point.
No,
Don't let him talk anymore.
no, that is a valid point. That is a very valid point. I think mentors are a really good thing. I think where it differentiates is if the person you're mentoring is now affecting you as a mentor.
Okay.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so with that, you have to have the capacity to be a mentor. And that person needs to have the capacity to be mentored. So it's like you said, it is a double-edged sword, but it goes two ways. It's like a two-way relationship. I can give you something, you can take it, you can do good or you can do bad with it. If you start doing bad with it, then I'm going to question you and be like, okay, is this something you want? Yeah, I want it. Okay, I'm going to give you this good. You're going to do good or you're going to do bad. You do bad with it. I'm like, okay, I'm questioning, like, do you really want this? And then at some point you have to be like, okay, you don't want this. And so I feel like that's where you have to really be exclusive. Because even some mentors, because I know some mentors, they'll take, like the academy mentors, they'll take hundreds and hundreds of people into their thing. Sure. I feel like a good mentor is one that is very selective with who they want to bring in, for the mere fact of, now me as a mentor, my time alone is valuable. The time, if I were to mentor someone, and maybe one day I wish to be in a leadership position to be able to mentor someone, but if I am going to take my time away from my team that I'm building wealth with, not just wealth, generational wealth, excuse me, if I'm going to take away from that and I'm going to apply a little bit of time to you, you better hold my time as valuable as I hold it, because now you're not just taking food away from me, you're taking food away from these people. You're taking out of their plate. And that's the way you got to think about it too. So it's like, I feel like mentorship is definitely a very important thing, but you got to be very exclusive with who you give it to. Because I've had it to where people are like, oh yeah, this. I've known people that have gone mentorship, but it's like, you don't take it serious. Now you're wasting that person's time. And then you're like, oh, my mentor's mad, this and this. I'm like, yeah, he's mad. It's just like coaching. And it's crazy because I've had this conversation with several coaches, both in bodybuilding and powerlifting. And they have athletes getting ready for a meet. They're out here eating like crap, not making weight. Their numbers are not matching to what they should be. This and that, all this different stuff. And they're like, oh, I didn't do good at my meet. I bombed out. Bro, because 3 weeks ago, you was eating this, you were missing gym, you were missing your accessories, you were missing your lifts, you were out here partying, getting drunk, not getting proper sleep. And then you wonder why, now, two things. Why, one, you were dropped as an athlete. Two, why you did shit at your meet. Same thing with bodybuilding. You have these coaches, oh yeah, I placed fourth because of my this. I'm like, well, bro, I saw you 5 weeks out. You was eating like shit. You were skipping cardio. You were skipping this exercise. You were leaving the gym early, and then you're blaming it on your coach. But that's on you. You're not taking it serious, and you took a spot out of your coach's time to be able to invest in someone that actually wanted it.
Dude, if I were to start my own religion, one of the capital sins would be wasting someone's time. I would you're so right. You're so right. And there was a point that you made at the very beginning that I think was equally as important, which was, do you have the capacity? Like, if I don't have it right now to mentor somebody. Can I be honest with you guys? I barely have it to have brothers around.
Oh, you don't want to sit around?
Listen to what I'm saying. I know you're joking. I barely have it. I barely have it to even have a team around me. I barely have it to date. I barely have it to deal with people at my job. I barely have it. I'll be the first to say it because I haven't heard anybody say this recently. I'm barely holding it together, dude. Like, not in the sense of like tomorrow I'm gonna have a mental breakdown, but I swear to you,
I feel that.
What has happened to me more often than not in the last 2 years is I have been thinking about this dream home in New Zealand. And I'm like, dude, could I make that happen right now? Do I have the ability to make that happen right now? And every day it gets more real because I do better and better year over year. And so every day it becomes more of a reality. And then I have to keep fighting this urge to just completely disappear. And the people at my job would crack up right now if they saw this, and maybe they might, and they'll talk to me about it because I mention this on a daily basis. I'm like, hey, who wants to come to New Zealand? Like, it's my little running joke, but there's where there's smoke, there's fire. Like, I genuinely think about leaving, and it's not even just leaving the country, it's like leaving everyone behind so I can go be at what I have decided as peace. But something tells me I'm destined for more, and my team not only needs me, but I need you all. I need you all to keep pushing and motivating me and showing up and doing stuff with me, because I don't necessarily have the capacity even to do it by myself. Isn't that interesting? And I know I most certainly don't have it to do with somebody like today. I love everyone, but if someone was like, dude, could you sit down and try and teach me editing? I would probably try, but I know right now I don't have the capacity to teach somebody how to edit. I still need to learn so much about editing myself. I don't have the capacity to teach somebody how to do it, right? Yesterday I was at Muay Thai. Dude, I'm like, they had this brand new kid in there who came with a friend, and I'm like doing all my stuff. I'm like working. I'm like, oh, and I'm hitting him with stuff, and every combo's landing. And then it clicked to me. I was like, I haven't seen him before. I was like, he's new, isn't he? Because he's not blocking any of this stuff. He's not like bringing that knee up. He's not doing it. So I was like, hey, how long you been training? He's like, this is like my third time. I was like, dude, I'm over here like beating him down. So I had to stop, and I had to like, for 3 sparring sessions, which are 3-minute intervals, I was like basically coaching him through stuff. And the only value I can say was genuinely there is 2 things. Number one, it made me feel good to help. That's huge. And number 2, I would say to some degree it kind of helped me think about what I was doing for myself. So that's not a bad thing either. But I will tell you, from an overall, it was not more helpful to me to stop to try and help him. I should have been working on my own repetition. I should have been working on my own growth and my own progress, because I am not at a stage yet where I know enough that I can stop doing what I need to do for me to help somebody else. Capacity.
For real. Yeah. And I'm glad you said that you don't have the capacity, because I'm gonna be honest with you, Mike and I will probably hold you to the standard that if you come to us about, oh yeah, there's this friend that we're trying to help, this and this, we're both gonna ask you, like, are you capable to allow yourself to invest in something that is not going to bring you down, is not going to take away from not only what the group is doing, but what you're capable to do?
Let's cut through all the bullshit and just go to a very direct situation. You did this to me the other day. There was this young lady.
Here we go, boys.
Let's just run it. Let's run it.
Let's run it up.
I'm ready. We're not going to mention names. I love this person. I mean, like, actual love. If they called me tonight and they were like, I have an issue, I'd promise you I'd be one of the first people on the scene to solve it. But I was losing myself in trying to be there for that person and be with that person more specifically. And so you pulled me to the side the other day, and Mike had said some things as well. I don't want to underplay that. And you were like, do you have the capacity to be able to handle this person and work with this person? And I realized as I was driving home, I was like, man, he's so right, I don't. And so my entire dynamic had to change with this person. I can tell that they can tell, and I can see that they understand that there's a distance that had to happen. And it really does hurt. Like, that's the part that they don't talk to you about, is like, you make that change, like it causes actual pain and discomfort. But I had to eat my own words and follow my own wisdom, if you will, which always sucks, right? I'd rather just give it to you and then you have to deal with it. But I had to actually listen to what you were saying and practice what I preach and remove somebody. And that was difficult. It was really difficult to do. But it was interesting because that was a key moment for you and I, Andrew, where I was like, okay, Andrew's going to tell me what's right and not what I want to hear.
Bars.
For real, I told you, I said, do you want me to listen or do you want me to say something?
That's exactly what he said.
I gave him the opportunity. I was like, do you want me to listen or do you want me to say something? You're like, say something. I need to hear it. And I was like, all right. But it's like, I love the fact that you had the capacity to take what I had to say with not like, oh, Andrew just doesn't want to see me happy. But you took it to the capacity of being like, oh man, like he's looking out for me. You know what I mean? Because I'm not gonna lie, like I'm sure Mike feels the same way. Like we saw you going down this like going back and forth with yourself. But I feel like that's the capacity of our group to where we're able to be like, yo, Mike, sit up straight. You're slacking. You ain't pulling your own this and that. You acting a little bit different. You're allowing yourself to kind of drift off. Yo, Reg, or even you guys like, yo, Andrew, like, can you do this? Can you do this? Can you do this? And we take it to with pure intent and with pure love. Yeah, I feel like that's a big thing with pure love. And kind of backtracking to like what you said about, Andrew treating his brother and like, yeah, we're brothers. Like we look out for each other. Aside from them being blood brothers, like they look out for each other. And for me, I'm just like, dang, like I want it to be where I know that if I was struggling, I've said this before, if I was struggling, I could be like, yo, Reg, I'm going through it. And you'd be like, all right, what do you need me to do? Yo, Mike, I'm struggling. All right, bet. What do you need me to do? Where you, if you're not always going to be, you ain't always going to be 100%. Like I said it before, if one of us isn't good, we got 4 or 5 other brothers that are going to be good. 4 or 5 is better than the single, you know what I mean? Now, if all 5 of us are bad, we're gonna have to have a conversation.
Yeah, we got different problems to talk about.
Yeah, but you know what I mean? And I love that we have the capability and the capacity to become, back to maturity. A lot of people don't have the capacity for you to have a real conversation. Be like, yo, you should maybe not do that because of so-and-so reason. I feel like there's a lot of people that have a lot of people in their group that just tell them what they want to hear.
I feel like it's the value that we have in each other, because it's like, I think of it as like a stock. You're going to throw value into something you want to see good in 5 years. Otherwise, you're just going to just spit some BS and just hope for the best. But if you actually truly see with yourself with the highest stock in 5 years, you're going to give all the value you can to protect both them and you, because especially if we're a team, you need this team to be strong. So yeah, 5 years.
This is the second time he compared us to a stock. How you feeling about that? I feel like he's gonna sell us in a few years.
I know. Yeah, for real. He's like, I'm gonna wait till y'all don't depreciate and y'all go up.
Mike said, yesterday's price is not today's price.